If you have never heard that story before, you might be thinking, what? If you've heard that story every Sunday before Lent for most of your life, you might be saying, what? It is a mystery story, at least on first reading. And I like to put these two stories together, the story of Moses' face shining when he had been speaking with God, and of Jesus being transfigured so much that his face was shining, his clothes were brighter than they could imagine. This story appears in the three synoptic gospels, but Luke is unique that he emphasized that Jesus went to pray, not necessarily to meet up with a couple of guys from their past. The verse about being heavy with sleep is also unique to Luke, with the uncertainty as to whether or not the three disciples were asleep or if they were in that place of half awake, half asleep, like many of us find ourselves on our couches at night, wondering, wait, what time is it and what did I miss? These two stories each tell us about what we can see or what can happen when we see what God is doing in the world, that our faces shine with a brighter light, and that some people aren't ready for that, and that our faces might seem different. We might be afraid. We might be uncertain. But in both instances, people who knew the main person in the story, Moses, Jesus, they knew something was different, even if only for a moment. And it made me start thinking about some of what we've been seeing, and when we see one another in a different way. And I was thinking about instances where I've been able to look at somebody and know in a second that something was different about them, but it's not always because their faces are shining. We've seen a lot of faces with anger, with mistrust, with fear. And it made me start thinking about an incident one time where I was with a family in the hospital, and they asked me to go and see if the patient was awake yet, because they were trying to figure out who was going to deliver some difficult news to this person. And I walked in the room and he was awake, and the minute I walked in, he went, "Okay, what happened? What's wrong?" And I said, "Nothing." And he said, "Don't ever play poker with me." And I tried really hard to have a blank face, because I've been told I can do that really well, but not in that instance. But I was also thinking about a couple of other instances, and I confessed at the 8:30 service, this is one of those Sundays where I wish we had screens in the room so I could show you the pictures I'm talking about, because for me, they're very vivid, but they may not be quite so vivid for you. But there was one in particular in 2014 where Marcus Smart, who did play for the Boston Celtics and is now in Memphis because Boston traded him, but he was playing in his sophomore season at Oklahoma State, and he was good enough after his freshman year. He could have transferred, but he decided to come back and play for another year. And they were having a great season, and they went to Lubbock to play Texas Tech. And he went for a ball out of bounds, and when he did, he ran into the crowd in the stands behind the basket. And when he came up, he was fighting, and said that a gentleman in the crowd had made a racial slur towards him. And the picture of the two of them, they are a distance apart. I'm looking at it here in front of me. They're a distance apart, and you can tell they're engaged in a heated conversation. But there are two women in the picture that get my attention. There's one who is standing next to the man in the crowd, and as I'm looking at it, she is going like this, like pointing, like, "You get back on that court." I have no idea what she's saying. That's just what I give her. But the other woman, and remember, this is a basketball player, so he's up here and she's at about here. And she is so close, she's touching him. And she's like this towards him. And her face is contorted, and you can tell that angry words are being spoken. Now, he apologized. He did a suspension. Nothing with anybody in the crowd. What's the cost of that? That was one of my first ones. Then there was another time in 2019 in Washington, D.C., when there was a group of high school kids from Kentucky who had been there for a pro-life march, and there was a group of Native American leaders who were going to pray at the Lincoln Memorial, and the two groups met, and there was another group there as well. And maybe you remember the picture of the young man from the high school and the Native American leader very close to one another. And people remarked about it looked like the young man had a smirk on his face. All kinds of stories came out afterwards about it. But those stories in particular made me wonder if it's ever possible to have a negative transfiguration. That our faces tell who we are, not for where we see God at work or how we feel God at work in our lives, but for things that are difficult, that we show a different side of ourselves. It's true, and I'm going to make a suggestion that the transfiguration couldn't happen today, right? Because somebody would pull out their cell phone, and here comes the cloud, and here's the part where Jesus was talking to Elijah, or they'd be posting, LOL, dude, you'll never believe where I am. Okay, maybe not LOL, maybe PTL, I don't know. But where do we see transfiguration today? So I want to tell you a story. And I don't know if it fits or not, but it fits in my mind, about a young man who grew up in a town in northwest Kansas, a town that I served the church there for 7 years. So when I got there, he was pretty young. And when he was in middle school, he decided he wanted to join the choir, which I kind of loved. That's about the time I joined. And on All Saints Sunday, we were trying an experiment for the first time. And I had given my phone number to the youth group and said, if I say something in worship that you don't know what it means, text me. I don't know what I was thinking. And so I'm going along, and it's All Saints Sunday. And I've said All Saints so many times. And pretty early on, I hear ping, and I look, and it's from Lane. And it said, so what's a saint? And I turned to him. He was in the choir, and I was like, really? He was like, you said to text our questions. So we started from scratch, which is why I often say, if you've never heard this story before, here it is. Then there was the Christmas that he got a bass guitar. And he learned the bass line of Smoke on the Water. And every year on Christmas Eve in this church, for the 30 minutes prior to the worship service, we invited children and youth to bring their talents and their skills, and they could perform for whoever arrived early. And so from noon on Christmas Eve until the service, until the 30 minutes before, Lane was at the church with his bass guitar and his amplifier, and all I heard for those hours was bum, 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 ba-dum. Lane, I think you got it. No, I need to practice one more time. As he and his friends grew, and thank you, Liz, for the grow up, his friends got a lot taller than Lane and broader shouldered, and he still did everything. He wrestled, he played football, and they all showed up one day for confirmation. And They were all so excited. And Lane walked in, and I call it his transfiguration moment because he had the most peaceful look on his face. And he was usually the one who walked in and he had lots of stories to tell and wanted to share all this that had happened. And his friends were the ones going, "Did you hear? Did you hear?" And I'm thinking, no. And again, Lane, sometimes I worried because his shoulder pads were so loose on him. I thought, oh my gosh, something bad happened. And he's still on the pain meds. I didn't know. And they said, Lane got a penalty for unnecessary roughness. What? And I looked at him, I said, Lane, is that true? Oh, yeah. And it was just this look. And for an entire season, he had been listening to bigger kids on the offensive line of opposing teams look across that imaginary line of scrimmage and tell him he wasn't big enough, he wasn't strong enough, he wasn't good enough to take anybody down. And every game he took it. And every game he would do his best. But that day, Lane found a strength that he hadn't found before. And not only did he tackle the kid, but he did it with such gusto, he got a 15-yard penalty. And his response to that when he came to confirmation was not, "I'm so ashamed," but yes! Because he had found something inside of him. Now, I'm not suggesting we go out and tackle people. I am not suggesting that we go out and do violent things. I'm suggesting that we find where the Spirit of God is within us and leading us to where we know that we are living who God has made us to be. That was his for that moment. Last fall, this church, since I've been here and probably before, has been privileged to be entrusted with hosting the Transgender Day of Remembrance service. And with everything that's been in the news lately and with the decisions made in Iowa this week, I've been thinking a lot about being transfigured. And last fall, one of our speakers stood in this place, and the first words out of his mouth were, "It is a blessing to be trans." And he said, it's like I have a block that is before me, and I chisel away everything that is not me. I will never forget those words, not just for his life and it being his truth, but that's what I believe this transfiguration moment is. That we chip away the things from our lives that are not what God intends for us or what God intended for us. And we find the beauty within. We find the part of us that God is shining through, and that's what we share and who we share in the world. This week, as I was getting ready for this morning, I turned to the Interpreter's Bible and read a piece that got my attention, that the experience of seeing ordinary things transfigured is by no means rare. It's not rare. That moment on a mountaintop, we talk about it, but it's not the only time it's ever happened. We have the unexpected privilege of seeing some familiar, ordinary object assume, even if only for a moment, a new and glorious aspect as we see it in a fresh perspective. And a realization of its true significance breaks in upon us. Transfiguration does not hide reality. It reveals it. And we may have seen an object or a person hundreds of times, but now we see it. And once we've seen it, We can't miss it. And that means we have to be looking. We have to pay attention. We have to note the world around us. And I know that sometimes it's so much easier to be prepared to see what's wrong, to see what hasn't changed, that we sometimes miss the new and good that is all around us. We miss the moments when God breaks into our world, into our lives, and reveals beauty to us, even if it is the most simple way. And we need that beauty. We thrive on that beauty. We need it for our everyday lives. So those examples that I listed earlier, it's so easy to remember those and note when faces are transformed by anger, by fear, by hate. But the transfiguration we long for, the moment on the mountaintop when our faces are shining, come when we are changed by hope and by promise, by love and by God. We may not even know it's happening. But when we live our true selves, when we live the life God intends, someone will see that moment when your face is shining. We don't often talk about it in this way. But when Jesus gathered his friends at a table, and he shared bread and wine with them, he transfigured those elements for us forever. And as we gather at the table, may we remember, may we feel God shining through us, and may we continue to find the pathway that God sets so that we may be transfigured in the world.
Shine your light, shine your light. Everybody make it big and bright. Shine your light. Shine your light. Take it on your journey, everywhere you go.
Take it to the mountain, take it to the valley low,
Let your brother see it.
and your sister too. Shine your light, shine your light. Your light, shine your light.
Take it to a neighbor, help in any way.
Take it to a stranger, love with all you do and say.
Be a light to follow.
Be a light that leads